What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Keeping Karlsson. I'm Jeremy Versillo, and joining me tonight, my pal and yours, Derrick. Derrick, you're becoming a bit of a regular here on this Short Shifts podcast. Anything going on in your life right now?
Well, unfortunately this week I've been dealing with some sick children, but still able to work and able to come on the show, which is nice. And hopefully everyone will be healthy soon.
Yeah, I hope your kids get off the IR as soon as possible and are healthy and ready to play. Speaking of off the IR, as usual, we are starting with our injuries and outjuries. And one of them is an injury that was supposed to be an outjury, but now it's apparently an injury again. It's Adin Hill. And all I have to say is WTF is up with Adin Hill. He was supposed to start yesterday, was confirmed by the coach, and then didn't come off IR and start, and ends up not playing either game of the back-to-back, and they called up Jiri Patera and Isaiah Saville to get these games. Do you have any clue what's going on here? Any guesses? Or is this just a situation you need to get away from as fast as possible?
Well, I don't think I'd agree with that last part because, ultimately Hill and even Thompson in the games he's playing, they're in such a good situation in Vegas. They've both performed well when they've been healthy and when they've got starts, and Hill has gotten a majority of the starts so far this season. I think that because they're in such a good place, you definitely don't want to be cutting bait at this point unless you're, an absolute desperate for starts situation. If you can, hold on for another day or another week to hear what's going on, I think you definitely should for someone as potentially valuable as Hill is. It seems like it could have been a setback and they maybe just don't know how much yet, or maybe they just wanted a chance to give some games to Patera and Saville, I'm not sure. These guys, especially Saville, who I don't think has been up before, they might have wanted to give him a chance in a back-to-back and saw no need to rush Hill back. So, maybe we'll see over the next few days if we get more information. If something comes out that Hill's out long-term, further, then you can reassess. But at least for now, while we don't know what the situation is, I wouldn't cut bait yet.
I agree with you. I think this is the panicky Adin Hill owner in me getting really frustrated with this. I am a bit worried that if he had that one setback a couple weeks ago where he came back for a game and then left, and now whatever this is, I'm worried it's something that's going to bother him all season, even if he does come back or when he does come back, because I don't think it's anything season ending. So I guess in the back of my mind, I'm just a little bit nervous about that. And as we'll get to later, Vegas has actually been really bad for the last month. But on a per-game basis before the injury, Adin Hill was one of the best goalies you could have in fantasy, was putting up incredible numbers in the real-life categories too, and all of the advanced stats. So just got to hold on. I hope you have an IR slot. I hope you didn't drop anybody too good to take him off IR because you just had to put him back on. Another goalie that I believe Lewis and Shams covered on Tuesday, Alex Nedeljkovic, is getting his second start in a row. Is he the 1A there now, or is he still a 1B who just happens to be hot?
Yeah, he's been a little bit hot, but that hotness may be ending as of tonight. Partway through tonight's game against Vancouver, as of the end of the first period, Nedeljkovic had allowed 3 goals on the first 9 shots. And they're in the second period now, but I haven't seen any more shots come in. So I'm actually not sure if he's starting the second period or if Jarry's come in right now as of when we're recording. The organization definitely over the course of the summer and so far this year, I think has signaled a lot of support for Jarry. He's got a hefty contract of 4 more seasons at $5.4 million after this one. I don't see them trading him or buying him out or sending him down to the minors like happened to Jack Campbell. There may be periods where Ned gets a few more games, but over the rest of the season, I think there's a better chance that they'll go back to Jarry as a workhorse starter as opposed to Ned becoming a workhorse starter. Now, as was discussed a couple of days ago, it's possible they could just keep trading starts and neither one could be, valuable enough to hold. But in the short term, again, I think Jarry is the one with the potential to be really valuable. Ned at his best is probably going to still be a 50-50. I don't see a situation where Ned becomes the workhorse.
Following the money is usually a good way to figure out a goalie situation. The interesting thing, though, is draft capital-wise and pedigree-wise, they're almost identical. They were drafted a year apart. Ned was a 37th overall pick, and Jarry was a 44th overall pick, so both kind of early second rounders, which is probably one of the top 3 goalies going in that class, because goalies rarely get picked in the first. So I think Ned may be playing himself into a starter's opportunity next year, maybe with a different team, because I believe he's on a 1-year contract.
Yeah, the Penguins aren't committed to him beyond this season. They may be trying him out. They're interested to see if he can carry a workload. But at least as of now, the one that they're married to, so to speak, is Jarry. So,
and I wonder, with Pittsburgh kind of fading in the standings and the East wildcard race being really tough, if they fall out of it, maybe he's a trade candidate. They can get some assets back for a young goalie who wants an opportunity to start somewhere, like, who knows, Edmonton, maybe? Yeah, Skinner's been good, so maybe not Edmonton, but there's plenty of teams who always want goalies.
I think they're still in the playoff race now for sure, and they're certainly motivated to compete while they have their aging stars still producing. So we'll see if they're sellers at the deadline or maybe even buyers too. That would be the one wild card that could really affect the value of both Ned and Jarry.
Another guy who's been popping onto the radar recently, Dylan Guenther finally got his call up this year. We saw what he did in World Juniors last year. He played a number of games with Arizona after the World Juniors last year, or maybe before. He has a handful of NHL games, has always looked good, sniping winger. In 2 games since his call up, he's averaging 16 minutes a night, averaging 4 shots a game, 8 shots in 2 games, has 2 goals, an assist, playing on line 2 and power play 1. This may be the time that he sticks with the team. He could be relevant in Arizona, playing with Cooley and Bukestad, I believe. Is there any strong interest here, or do you think it's a flash in the pan and a hot start for a guy who just got called up?
Yeah, I think at best it's deep league interest for me. He's playing with Cooley, which we might have thought was the top line at the beginning of the season, but the way things have panned out so far this year, that isn't really the case. I think it's worth noting that Arizona has a pretty good schedule coming up, and in particular through the month of February, they get a bunch of off-night games in several weeks in a row, so it's worth keeping in mind for that, but it would have to be, I think, a deep league for me to be interested.
I'm going to go a bit against the grain here and give a hot take and say that assuming he keeps the power play 1 and 15 to 16 minute a night deployment, I like him better than both Schmaltz and Cooley on Arizona. And now that may be a streamer still in most leagues. I don't think Cooley's owned in many leagues, and I think Schmaltz is on a couple of my wires. But if he's the trigger man and the one shooting, he's going to have a lot more shots and a lot more goals, which could lead to the heightened value from those pass-first guys. Next up, we've got some unfortunate injuries to report. Why don't you give us the update from Anaheim here?
Well, it's a double batch of bad news in Anaheim after the recent trade. Drysdale's gone. They have Mintyukov suffering a separated shoulder and out 4 to 6 weeks. And Zegras has a broken ankle requiring surgery that's going to happen soon, and he's going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. So definitely rough for the Ducks and their cast of young and promising players. Again, similar to Arizona, the Ducks also have a good schedule, again, for a very specific period. For them, it's I think it starts about 1 week later. It's February 19th to March 17th, a whole bunch of off-night games in a row. In the meantime, we've got Cam Fowler manning power play 1, which he's done occasionally over the last few years. I don't know. What else do you think is worth noting on this one, Jeremy?
I think Fowler's the main piece of note, even when he's had power play one, he hasn't been particularly fantasy relevant. The other big note is that Leo Carlsson could be ready to return by Sunday. And if he does, it's definite that he's going to be on power play one. Now with Zegras out, I think there were questions as to where he'd line up on the power play with everybody healthy. But this gives him 6 weeks of runway on power play one. And I'd be looking to add Leo Carlsson if he got dropped in any leagues. Next injury we have is Jeff Skinner, who is out for 4 to 6 weeks, or week to week, with an upper body injury. The upgraded deployment on Buffalo here is Casey Middlestat lined up as the first line left wing with Thompson and Tuck, and Jack Quinn, who's been pretty hot since returning from injury a couple weeks ago, is on power play one, and I believe has a point tonight, although Buffalo's getting shelled currently. Buffalo's doing the shelling? What's the score of that game?
They are shelling. It's 4-1 in the second period as of recording right now, and Middlestat hasn't got on the score sheet, but Thompson's got a pair of goals. Dahlin's got a pair of assists. So, not good for Skinner owners, but everyone else seems to be doing okay, at least so far.
Yeah, I guess with the new lines clicking, they probably will keep rolling them out. Also to note, in that Buffalo-Ottawa game, Anton Forsberg left with injury, and Korpisalo came in cold, gave up 3 goals, and it's not going well, but he may be getting more starts coming up soon. Speaking of Ottawa, Josh Norris is out for Thursday's game with an upper body injury. No timetable there. Any news or notable things about this?
No, we'll have to wait for more information. The one maybe notable piece on this one is that we also know that soon, not yet, we're still, I think, a couple weeks away, but soon Shane Pinto is going to be eligible to return, or eligible to sign and return with Ottawa. And, if Norris is out for a long term, maybe Pinto slides into that second line center role. We'll see, how it is. It could just be a one game thing. And in that case, it might not be much for Norris to worry about. But if he is out for a while, and if Pinto usurps a bit of his role, then it might be tough for him when he comes back. Still early to say, though.
That's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. I question how fast Pinto will get up to game speed, given his long suspension. Also notable, today they shuffled the line, so Giroux was centering the first line, and Stützle was centering the second line. So no huge deployment upgrade for anyone there, except for one of the wingers. More breaking news from the Game Day News channel in our Keeping Karlsson Patrons Discord. Pyotr Kochetkov is being helped off the ice and Ranta's coming in. That's not good for the Canes.
Certainly not. Getting me concerned as well, as I'm a manager of his in multiple leagues.
Yeah, helped off the ice is never a good sign for goalies, although we've seen it happen and people come back for the next game. So something to keep an eye on tomorrow as you're listening to this. One bright spot in the injury outjury, TJ Oshie is finally returning for the Caps. He was lining up with Evgeny Kuznetsov and Hendrix Lapierre today, although that's with Tom Wilson scratched, and their line rushes earlier in the week had completely different setups, including Oshie with Strome and Pacioretty. Either way, Oshie's locked into the top 6, probably on power play 1. I haven't seen any data from this game about that yet. I think he's worth a pickup in leagues if you need a kind of back end of your bench guy to try out.
Yeah, Oshie's always been valuable and productive when he's healthy. And, he's a tough guy to draft because you can, at this point in his career, you can count on him to miss a lot of time. But for the games he's in, he's usually a good start. So far in this game, we've actually seen Pacioretty get I think it's his first goal back here. If I take a look, his first goal back since returning from this second Achilles injury. So good for him and this situation. And we'll see if Washington can kind of revitalize their season a bit.
And just confirming, there have been no Washington power plays in that game yet, so I don't know where Oshie is. But in the past, he's kind of been in that Braden Point middle slot, where it actually may help Ovechkin also, because it gives a second person that you can pass to for a shot at a completely different angle. And with that, let's go to our commercial break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. As we alluded to earlier in the show, I'm going to ask the age-old question that Keeping Karlsson and their patrons love asking: does Vegas suck? Normally you ask that about a player, but I'm going to ask it about Vegas as a whole. Here are the stats from Vegas per Paul De Los Santos on Twitter, who's one of their beat writers or fan writers. If you take away the 5-goal outbursts against the Islanders, Vegas is averaging 1.89 goals per game since December 17th. That's almost a month averaging Sharks levels of goals per game. My take on this is it's a depth problem. For the last 30 days, which is 12 games played, Stone has 14 points, Eichel has 10, Marchessault has 8, which is all very similar to the paces you could expect from those guys. The problem is the non-power play 1 guys are absolutely dry. I think they're missing the stability of a Riley Smith type player on the second line. Barbashev is a good player, but just lacks that dynamic element. Chandler Stevenson is completely gone from relevance. And I think missing Shea Theodore hurts too. I wonder if they're going to be a major player in the trade market, because they clearly have a very good hockey team and some good goaltending, but could really use a chance to spread out the scoring and not let teams gang up on that top line and shut down them offensively.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the advanced stats have to say about expected goals and how they've performed in the same period. It does seem, pretty unusual for them to be under 2 in actual goals. Again, leaving away that 1 game. I think that Vegas is likely comfortable enough with its, assuming the goaltending situation is not, both guys injured long term. I expect they'd be comfortable with their playoff chances, comfortable with, riding out this period of maybe a little less offense and, as you said, loading up at the deadline. That's something they've certainly done, before in previous years leading up to their Stanley Cup last year. So I guess I don't have a good answer to do they suck. I'm tempted to say they don't.
I totally agree that they don't suck. They're comfortably the second place team in the Pacific, even being 3-7-0 in their last 10 games. I think some of the percentages are a bit low. I looked at least at some 5v5 shooting percentages, and some of their lines were in the 4 or 5% range for the past month, which is very unsustainably low for a top-end line. I also think that the style of hockey they're playing, the players they lean on, especially their defensemen, are pretty built for playoffs already. We saw them have the cup run last year, obviously, and I think they'll be able to have success even if they don't add players. But it's definitely frustrating as a fantasy owner of anybody who's not Eichel, Marchessault, or Stone, and even for those guys, I think it's been a bit frustrating because of the amount of games they've gotten shut out recently. Next up, we have some hot and cold streaks. You pointed out a hot streak that an old rookie who many people were leaving for dead this season has really blazed up this young guy.
Yeah, in this case, it's Alexis Lafreniere, a much maligned first overall pick, but as the more patient people would say, he's just been taking his time getting up to being a valuable player, valuable forward in the league. He's been in a really good situation lately, playing with a red-hot Vincent Trocheck and, of course, fiery white-hot Artemi Panarin. And with that line combo in particular, he's up to 29 shots in his last 10 games. He's got 2 goals and 7 assists in that span. He's still only 32% rostered in Yahoo leagues overall, although he is 98% rostered in Kickuffle. So in the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, kickuffle.com, you probably won't be able to find him there, but maybe in your other leagues could be some good supplementary offense, at least while he maintains valuable deployment like this. There's an interesting wrinkle in this as of tonight that Mika Zibanejad isn't playing, and so I'm not sure exactly how the lines are being affected by that. But as long as Lafreniere is playing with some combination of Panarin, Trocheck, maybe even Kreider, that's a pretty good situation to be in.
Yeah, that second line, quote unquote, has kind of taken over the lead this year with Zibanejad and Kreider taking a bit of a step back. I think they've been held back by Blake Wheeler the times he's been on that line. But Lafreniere looks every bit the first overall pick he was. He's already been proven to be a very responsible two-way player. That's part of what elevated him to that first overall pick. And even my Ranger fan friends have been telling me all along that, yeah, he's not scoring, but he's still been a good player for us. And as a Kraken fan, that makes me hopeful that Shane Wright's going to look like that in 3 more years, or I guess 2 more years. Sometimes it takes time for these young guys to adjust to the NHL and show up to their potential.
The vast majority of top picks are not a Connor Bedard or a Connor McDavid. They do generally need time.
Yeah, we really have to take a step back and appreciate what the 18 and 19-year-olds who step into the NHL and do incredible things are doing, because I think people get the expectation that everyone's going to be a Bedard or a Matthews or a McDavid. And like you said, it's the vast majority are not. We have 2 forward cold streaks to contrast with this. Which one do you want to take? Teuvo Teravainen or Andrei Kuzmenko?
I'll take Teravainen, and his situation is interesting because he's been playing on the top line with also, really hot players in Sebastian Aho and Andrei Svechnikov, and they've been producing, but he hasn't. He's been, only getting 1 point and 3 shots in total in his last 5 games. And he's kind of been a winger that maybe, isn't the biggest shooter. He maybe gets a little bit more. He sometimes scores, he sometimes gets assists, but he's not a volume shooter. But only 3 shots in 5 games is pretty low for a top line winger. And, it's interesting that he's holding the deployment for now. As long as the others are producing, maybe they'll keep it going. But on the other hand, Necas is returning soon. And if, the Carolina is off in a blender, so he could be bumped back down at some point. And if that happens, I would be cutting bait at this point.
I definitely think he's not worth an own in leagues where peripherals count a lot. He doesn't block much, he doesn't hit much, he doesn't shoot much, so it's hard if he's not getting 70 points a season for him to be fantasy relevant. I will credit the short shifts bump, though, because he has 2 assists today. Leave it up to a date with the Ducks to get off the schneid. Meanwhile, Andrei Kuzmenko has been similar kinds of frustrating. On top of the occasional scratch, he has had 1 or less shots in most of his recent games. I streamed him Monday, Tuesday, in which he got me, I think, a point or a point and a half total. Not like goals and assist points, but like fantasy points. It seems like he's kind of hit that wall with the Vancouver, and other players have just stepped past him. I'm a bit worried for him, honestly, as an NHL player. He's got a skill set where if he's not putting up points, he's not valuable to your team. So you never know with these younger Russian wingers who come over and are offensively talented. Sometimes as soon as they get on a coach's bad side, they'll bolt. Dadonov went back to Russia. Radulov went back to Russia. I don't know what Kuzmenko's status within his country is, but I'm already looking at this is kind of like a guy who may just disappear off the face of the earth next year.
Yeah, the one that came to mind for me was Nikita Gusev, who people were very excited about when he came over and, had a period where he was offensively producing, but then, it seems didn't have the staying power for the league.
And I think some of this is the expectations that were put on him last year after a 73-point rookie season. He shot 27% last year. Obviously, he's not going to do that again. He only shoots 1.5 times per game, so he's not going to be a big goal scorer. Somehow he scored 38 last year, though. I don't think he's underperforming what he should be by that much. I think he's probably a 50 to 55 point player. He's pacing 43 right now. Maybe people bought in a bit too much after the big numbers last year, though.
Yeah, and in terms of current situation, Vancouver is running a stacked top line right now, and he is not on it. So I think that if you haven't cut bait already, you likely are good to do so now, and keep an eye. If he gets back up playing with Miller or Pettersson, or you can change your mind then.
The bright side is he has been maintaining that power play one time. Hasn't done a ton with it recently, but he's got the passing skills that if he gets involved in the play on power play one, I think he'll get some points there. But yeah, I'm similar to Teravainen, who doesn't shoot, doesn't hit, doesn't block. Kuzmenko's very difficult to hold if he's not getting points. Some hot flames for you. See that pun?
Flaming hot.
Yeah, flaming hot. Mikael Backlund and Mackenzie Weegar are both in fuego right now. Backlund's shooting, I think, close to 4 times a game recent games, while Weegar is up to 5 points in his last 10 games, which is fine for a defenseman, but that's also while getting a hit and a half and 3 blocks per game. I would be very happy to have some of these guys. I got Weegar off the waivers earlier in season and haven't dropped him. Backlund, I think, is a bit less sustainable just because he doesn't play power play one and often gets thrown into defensive roles. But he's also getting 20 to 22 minutes a night. You're going to do something with that, even if you are a defensive center. Just look what someone like Philip Deneau does for what Backlund's style of deployment is.
Yeah, Backlund's an interesting case. He did get his extension. He's the heart and soul leader of the Flames. He hasn't been the most, offensively productive the last few years, but he's really having a bit of a renaissance right now, and I think it's a feel-good story for the team. So I wouldn't be surprised if it does continue, and enjoy it while it lasts.
Here's some fun little trivia game type thing for you. Where do you think Mackenzie Weegar ranks in cupful points among defensemen this year?
In total points, I would take a wild guess that he is 17th.
Try 7th.
Ooh.
Granted, there's some games played to go on there. I mean, he hasn't missed a game. Meanwhile, plenty of good defensemen have, so you can balance with that. But just the shots and the hits and the blocks from a guy who's going to get you 40 points anyway is really nice.
I wish this was the year I drafted him instead of last year. His first year in Calgary was not nearly so good.
Yeah, that was a bit of a rough year. Backlund, on the other hand, I think is more of just a ride him while he's hot and then drop him once you've got all the juice out of that orange. Last but not least, a Florida defenseman who probably wishes he was Mackenzie Weegar right about now. Tell us about Brandon Montour's struggles recently.
Yeah, so it seemed like when he initially came back from his injury break, he was doing okay, but in the 7 games since Christmas, he's only had 2 assists, 12 shots total, and he, unlike Weegar, is not a hitter or blocker. He really doesn't fill in those peripheral categories the same way. So yeah, definitely a cold stretch for Montour. There's, quite a few Florida defensemen who at times have been producing. For most of the first part of the season, it was Oliver Ekman-Larsson. It wasn't really as much Gustav Forsling, although Forsling has been better lately. And then, of course, you have Aaron Ekblad. Montour was definitely the standout last year, but at least, so far as we enter 2024. It doesn't seem like he's in the same great situation.
I think this may be a bit of a lost year for Montour. He's a very curious case because in his Anaheim and Buffalo days, he was this touted offensive defenseman who never had results. And then he goes to Florida and puts up incredible results for one season. And then he has shoulder surgery, and he isn't the same right now, but he's also a month removed from coming back from a long timetable recovery surgery. Like, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt in deeper leagues and keeper leagues, but in redraft, if you're just looking for points now, or if it's a shallower league, I could consider dropping him. Would you go that far in some leagues?
I probably would, especially a bangers league, a hit and block categories league, as we were saying, or a league where those stats are given a reasonable number of points. The one thing to note is that he, like a couple of those other Florida defensemen, are UFAs at the end of this year, and this was potentially a chance for him to cash in. Florida didn't extend him in the summer. They wanted to see if last year's production was legitimate and repeatable, and thus far it hasn't been, but he is certainly personally motivated to prove the rest of this season. I think that is the real him, that he deserves a big, contract, now at age 29 that would, take him through his productive UFA years.
Yeah, the contract drive definitely is a strong one. We'll see. I'm interested to see where he gets drafted next year and how he performs, because if he really is just recovering from his injury still and bounces back, he could be the steal of the draft next year. Or he could just be a one-hit wonder and never perform the way everybody hopes he will compared to this one season. That's all we have time for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to give us a follow at ShortShiftsKK, as well as Brian and Elon at Keeping Carlson. Please use www.gamedaytweets.com to get all the best info from Twitter without having to slog through the rest of that place. It includes team-by-team and searchable tweets by player name. Visit that site and the other great sites we use to research our episodes with at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, ShiftChart.com, Icy Data, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music were created by Pat Roach, and John Reed is our digital media producer. Until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.